Today we have a few minor bits of information which I suppose that I should cover. The release date of Wrath of the Lich King Classic, information about the experience buff, dungeon changes, Wintergrasp changes, there's even some class changes in here. Lots to go over, let's make a start. We'll begin with the big stuff. So I'm sure you saw the leak that Blizzard did not so long ago where the landing page for Wrath of the Lich King was updated and contained the actual release date, only to be redacted shortly after. I mean, at this point in time we all know Blizzard loves doing a good old leak, and frankly it's way too consistent across their games to be a whoopsie, but it certainly gets people talking about things. And as many expected, the leak was correct. Blizzard have now done a follow-up post where they officially confirm in blue that Wrath of the Lich King Classic will be launching on September 26th at 3 PM PDT. That's the same time as every major classic release so far, by the way. In fact, I'll go and find one of the release date images they put out for TBC. Just imagine it's blue and says Wrath of the Lich King instead. This is when it will be out for you. It's a 2-month notice. That's a lot better than we had for TBC already. Plenty of opportunity to go and put in for time off and get your character fully prepared for the expansion. Blizzard have also activated the Joyous Journeys buff across all classic servers. This is a bonus 50% experience buff to all activities in the game, which has been confirmed to persist up to the date of the launch of the expansion. So that's as good as a 2 months of 50% bonus XP. And if you do not want this bonus XP for whatever reason, you can go to an innkeeper and turn it off again. Also, in case you are wondering, yes, this buff will be active during the pre-patch, meaning you get to level your Death Knight super fast, as well as being active on the fresh realms. I suppose that's the next talking point. Where's pre-patch? Where's fresh? What's happening there? Well, the last we heard is that they will release alongside one another. However, we currently do not have a set date for these two things to happen. It would seem fairly logical, given 2 months till launch, to expect pre-patch somewhere around the halfway mark. For example, a 5-week pre-patch would begin around 22nd of August, a 4-week one would begin around 29th of August, and a 3-week pre-patch will begin around 5th of September. I don't see why it wouldn't be on the earlier end of the scale, and if I had to guess, I'd say a month pre-patch minimum sounds good. Because don't forget, on top of all the class changes, the updates and Death Knights, we have the whole Scourge zombie invasion thing to do again, which was one of the most chaotic, if not the most chaotic pre-patch Blizzard have ever done in the history of World of Warcraft, and I'm very interested to see how they recreate it and whether they do it faithfully to how it was. If you want to see the full extent of how insane it truly was, I have done a video on it on the full timeline of how it all went down back then. There is a reason it's well remembered, let me put it like that. Next up, big changes to dungeon farming as well as boosting in Burning Crusade Classic, and an idea of how things will be working moving forwards into Wrath. The moment people saw that 50% extra XP buff, you already know they were ready to get a non-stop line of people ready to stare at a wall whilst leveling their character. However, as you may remember, not so long ago, Blizzard said they were introducing the dungeon changes applied in Season of Mastery to the live version of the game. That has now happened. Here's what they've done. So the short version is that boosting and solo gold farming across the board have been harmed quite significantly, but not every single method that existed has been nerfed. So I set out to do some testing. First up, I went to test the lower level dungeons on my mage to see if mobs became either immune to slows or roots. Testing first the Stockade, second Scarlet Monastery, Cathedral, and third of all Zul'Farrak. In the first 2 dungeons there were no changes which I could see, remaining in combat for 1 minute and 30 seconds. Mobs were still both getting slowed and rooted. In Zul'Farrak, however, things began to get pretty wild. So I went to the Grave area, which was a very well-known gold farming spot back in the days of Classic. It got nerfed forever ago now, but it was just to test how the mobs work with slows and roots. And first of all, the mobs were teleporting to me if I started to run too far away, or sometimes they chain teleported me back to them. I tried hopping up on a reset spot and instantly every single mob, most of which were like 20 yards away, teleported to me. I tried to reset with invisibility, but a mob teleported to me mid-cast and I died. So I went back and tried to do a bit more of a controlled pull. This time just chain slowing and rooting and seeing what happens. After 30 seconds the mobs became immune to slows. A further 30 seconds later they became immune to roots. Also after the 1 minute mark passed, they began to spam a spell called Knockdown. This is a 2-second duration stun with no diminishing return at all, and they really spam it. Also during this stun you can't blink or ice block. You can see on the bar here I'm spamming these spells and nothing is happening. After this, I went to check on Strat Undead on the Paladin. It was quite a similar story, pulling a few mobs near the entrance. I couldn't tell if they were immune to roots or slows because, you know, Paladin. I assumed they were, but after 1 minute had passed, they also began to spam the same knockdown stun. Eventually here, you see I managed to cast Bubble, and guess what? They keep stunning you even though you have Bubble active. And I've heard it's the same with Free Action Potion. There's nothing you can do about it. Finally, I took my mage to the slave pens to test some mobs in there. Once again, after 30 seconds, they became immune to slows, a further 30 seconds later immune to roots, and 30 seconds after that, they also gained a 50% move speed boost. I bet mobs in the other dungeons also did this, I just didn't notice because you can't get away because they're stunning you too much. What didn't happen in the slow pens though is the stun at all. The stun usually began to be spammed after 1 minute, and if paladins aren't getting stunned, they can still boost just fine. So in short, low level dungeons are unchanged. Mid to high level dungeons where mobs are grey now gain a variety of bonus effects as combat goes on, the most dangerous by far being the stun. It appears as long as mobs are green, they will not do the stun but will become immune to slows, roots, and eventually gain a speed buff. So mages who rely on kiting to boost get harmed enormously by this, paladins less so. You can still very much boost or solo farm, but you have to be completing your pull around that 1 minute mark or you're going to get chain stunned to death, making it much less efficient. For TBC dungeons or just dungeons where mobs are still green for a level 70, pulls may be a little harder as mobs will catch you with their movement speed buff and potentially will teleport to you if you get too far away or hop to a reset spot, but there are no stuns, so I'm expecting it to still be possible, and I've seen footage of paladins still be able to boost in the slave pens just fine. All the same, I went to check on some of these starter zones as of last night, and wow, I haven't seen anything like this in some time. The big servers on EU like Gehenna's Horde or Firemore Alliance had a literal Flash Who player caps of between levels 1 and 4. With the XP buff and boosting less effective, this feels like a great time to be making a return to the game and hopefully being able to level alongside others and getting plenty of opportunities to run dungeons, which has been sorely missed for some time now. Moving on though, a quick bit of news for players who have characters on seasonal servers. Blizzard recently announced in a blue post that we're excited to let everyone know that there will be a way for Season of Mastery characters to transfer to either Classic Era or Wrath of the Lich King Classic for free when the current season begins to wind down. If you remember at the start of the season, Blizzard said transfers would be to Era only, so this is a great bit of news if you have a character on Season of Mastery. It might save you a character boost or having to level something new. This winding down of the season currently has no known date. At this point in time, Naxxramas is being PTR tested on Season of Mastery, so I'm gonna go ahead and say these characters are unlikely to be available at Wrath launch for play. Two more bits of news to cover. First up, a class change? No, really. The most interesting bit of this is that there's clearly somebody at Blizzard who is listening to people who know classes and have a good idea of identifying potentially problematic gameplay. I'm not going to go into super in-depth details on it, but basically Demonology Warlocks have a talent called Demonic Pact. This gives your raid 10% of your spell power after your demon crits, so it's in your interest to stack as much spell power as possible before you proc this talent through things like potions and trinkets and so on, and then the buff will last for 45 seconds. After 20 seconds, if your demon attacks again and crits, it will overwrite the old buff with whatever your current active spell power is, which means the optimal way to play Demonology was to stack up spell power as much as you could, send your demon in, let it get a crit, then have it attack for about 18 seconds, then pull it off your target and make it AFK for the remainder of the 45-second buff until either your procs happen again or you have to refresh the buff. Imagine if having your hunter pet not attack for about 40% of the time was the correct way to play the class. This change makes it so the buff updates much more frequently and a weaker buff cannot overlap a more powerful one. So in short, me, the guy who's going to be playing Demonology for the expansion, is very surprised and happy right now. There's not one bad thing about this change, and I'm interested to see now if any other classes with potentially problematic gameplay patterns get a look at. Belly weaving for hunters perhaps? I could see it happening. Finally, Wintergrasp. It's going to be changing from how it was in Wrath. Let's take a few notes from the blue post, then we can talk about it. They say, put simply, the battle for Wintergrasp as it existed in 2008 is fundamentally incompatible with layers or the modern sharding rewarding system for that matter. Behind the scenes, mechanisms, events, and scripts that control how the battle is initiated, how it's resolved, and how the rewards are given out cannot function properly across layers. Every 3 hours, players in the outdoor Wintergrasp zone or Dalaran will receive a notification that the battle for Wintergrasp is about to begin. Players within the outdoor Wintergrasp zone will receive a prompt, and players in Dalaran may speak to an NPC within their faction's area to enter the queue during a short window of time. If anyone on your faction participates in and wins a battle for Wintergrasp, your entire faction is granted the essence of Wintergrasp, and the buff will last until the next battle is initiated. This buff allows you access to additional content, such as being able to fight the elemental enemies in Wintergrasp zone after the battle, as well as access to Stonekeeper shards, a special currency that players could use to purchase powerful items such as mounts, item enchantments, and recipes. Lastly, and perhaps most important, this buff also conveys access to the raid zone, the Vault of Archivon. They also mentioned several times during this post that Wintergrasp will be an epic battleground. Okay, let's break that down then. So on 3.3.5, Wintergrasp worked like this. You still had to queue up or be in the zone. It was capped at 120 versus 120. It was not cross-server, and whichever faction won gained access to the bonus rewards as mentioned earlier for 3 hours. In WotLK Classic, and I am reading into this post a little here as how I interpret it, it's going to be an epic battleground. This is a term used in retail, and it means 40 versus 40 player cap. They also do mention 40 players during the post. Possible coincidence, but I doubt it. You are either in the zone when the battle is announced or in Dalaran. You queue up for the battleground and are teleported in, and the battle begins. Importantly, I read this as Wintergrasp will be cross-server just like any other battleground. There's still measures in place in case a game starts unevenly. They say tenacity is a stacking buff that vastly increases the power level of players on the underrepresented side. This can stack so high that players could conceivably become raid bosses unto themselves. This buff did exist back in OG Wrath. Whilst it was fun, it didn't really make you be able to win the game. You need more than just the ability to live and one-shot people, and you're also just going to get CC'd for an eternity. Moving on though, if anyone on your faction, literally anyone, is part of a Wintergrasp that wins the game, your entire faction gains Essence of Wintergrasp, which is a buff that allows you to benefit from the extra rewards from Wintergrasp like the Vault of Archivon, Stonekeeper shards, and so on. This means for many servers, I will go as far to say majority of servers at practically all times, will be able to access Vault of Archivon at the same time. This never happened in Old Wrath. In fact, it used to be the case there were faction-specific NPCs and guards around the inner walls of Wintergrasp for the winning faction after the battle concluded. I'm assuming this will have to be a sanctuary like Dalaran instead now, if both factions can access it at the same time. This is to be tested soon on the Wrath beta though, so we will know for sure. Seems again like a good change. It's reacting to how servers are nowadays, because without this, Wintergrasp will literally be a non-existent experience on big servers. You'd be sitting there on top of the walls for 30 minutes watching a bunch of overpowered people occasionally one-shot others, and it would just be boring. This means everyone on every server has a chance to experience a good Wintergrasp battle, as well as having a very good chance to gaining access to the rewards at all times. The only thing is it really a 40 versus 40 instead of 120 versus 120? If this change would have done one thing, it would have made it so 120 versus 120 would actually be able to happen all of the time rather than practically never. That is it though. That's all the news I have for today. No doubt plenty more changes and updates to happen between now and the big release day. Let me know your thoughts on everything we've gone over here. It's gone on for a little bit longer than I expected. As always guys, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I shall see you on the next one very soon.